On Thursday, August 23rd, 2012, I headed down to the Brooklyn Brewery in the Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, which is now growing by leaps and bounds, going from a 25-barrel brewing system to just about 2.5 years later to a fully functioning 50-barrel, more automated Rolex stainless steel brewing system, going from small to medium to now large 200-barrel fermenters. Brooklyn Brewery hopes to produce and release about 80 to 90,000 wort barrels by the end of fiscal year 2012. After checking out the brewery, we headed to the warehouse, which houses both the cold and warm storage used for bottle conditioning the 750 milliliter bottles bottled in Brooklyn itself. After that, we checked out some more areas of the brewery not normally seen on tours. So let me give you a glimpse of what I saw, and let's head down on a trip down Brewers Row.
6 o'clock in the morning, we have silos full of grain. Those are going to whirl to life, start taking that grain, grinding them down, not as fine as flour, just kind of cracking open those husks, and we're going to start the brewing process.
All this is new, there was no automation really at all before.
What we're going to do is put all of that grain into a mash tun. Now it's basically one of those big vessels. We're going to add grain and introduce water that's about 165 to 175 degrees depending on the style of beer. So we're going to be left with a sweet, syrupy liquid. We're also going to be left with a lot of spent grain that just looks like an oatmeal, a porridge. So the next step is to separate the two. One of those other vessels, think of it as a giant sieve. Liquid goes through, kind of a mesh screen, that grain stays on the top. The liquid that we want, that wort, that sweet liquid, will continue on the brew. That oatmeal we put into another silo over here. They will distribute it throughout Long Island and New Jersey, where a bunch of pigs and chickens eat it and become very, very happy. But then what we're going to do is take all that liquid that we're keeping for you guys, bring it to a boil and add those hops. That whole process will take about 8 hours, depending on the style.
After the beer is finished in the boil kettle, it is moved on to the packaging and fermentation area, where yeast is added and fermentation begins. As you see here in the video, brewer Dan Moss is cleaning out a trough that was filled with diatomaceous earth, a material used to filter beer before kegging and bottling. Moving along, we then went into the newly expanded fermentation hall, which houses all different sizes of fermenters, including the most recent addition to the fermentation hall of a bunch of 200-barrel fermenters, which more space has been allotted to add additional 200-barrel fermenters. That day, there was also some active fermentation going on of Brooklyn Oktoberfest, one of Brooklyn Brewery's seasonal beers available between August and October. Connecting all the fermenters is a complex system of tubes and pipes, which allows for easy transfer of beer from the fermenters to the bright tanks, and of course, to the bottling line. After fermentation and during fermentation, each batch is monitored closely by brewer and lab manager Tom Price to make sure quality is upheld. This lab is a new addition to Brooklyn Brewery and will help them expand and release a lot of new beers in the future. After the beer is bottled or kegged, it is moved across the street to Brooklyn Brewery's expansive warehouse. Our first stop in the warehouse was the cold storage room, which houses both kegs and bottles that have finished re-fermenting in one of two of Brooklyn Brewery's warm storage rooms, which are kept at a steady 76 degrees Fahrenheit to ensure consistent and timely bottle conditioning. Moving along in the warehouse, we went up onto the loading dock to watch a truck being loaded with bottles of Local 1 and other Brooklyn beers ready to be shipped to the distributors. We then moved on to the most coveted room of the brewery, or the room that quote-unquote does not exist, otherwise known as the barrel room, or the room that houses the bourbon barrels, which contain Brooklyn Brewery's most sought-after beer, their Black Ops, a Russian Imperial Stout aged in those bourbon barrels for 4 to 6 months and then released every December or early January.